A few people have approached me on Twitter or X, Twix, telling me that they were struggling with their faith and that they couldn't hear God in prayer. And they wanted some book recommendations for learning how to pray. And so today, what I want to do is share two books with you that really helped me, especially back in 2023, when I had just a bizarre conversion experience. There was so much going on. I really do look at these two books as foundational for anyone who wants to practice Catholic spirituality and actually know God. I know, crazy, but that's kind of the point. So in July of 23, I think I was sitting on my ottoman behind me. I was just deep in thought. Honestly, I think for about 2 hours, I had been sitting there. I was eating my lunch, and after a little while, I just kind of came up for air. I don't know if you're the kind of person to just like sit there and get lost in thought and time just goes by. That's what was happening. And all of a sudden, I realized I had like this physical empty feeling in my chest. It was a real physical feeling in my chest. And I was just wondering, like, what is going on? Why do I feel like this? What is happening? And then all of a sudden I realized, like, I feel like I need the Eucharist. At that point, I was a Sunday Catholic. I had returned to the church about a year before. And Mass was amazing on Sundays. It was the high point of my week. I loved going. And it wasn't like me being entertained. I mean, I go to a great church, but it was like something was happening. Something was just happening, and I just loved being there. But on this day, suddenly feeling like I needed the Eucharist, I started asking myself, okay, well, when is Mass again? So I started thinking about it. When is Mass again? Wait a minute. Today's Sunday. I just got home from church. What is going on? Okay, do we have daily Masses? Which is funny. I go to a huge church, and yes, we have daily Masses. We have Mass every day. And I didn't realize that every church I've ever gone to was like more of a rural church. It was a smaller parish. And when you go to a smaller parish, you don't usually have the benefit of daily Mass. You might have, I don't know, 3 or 4 Masses throughout the week, but it's not something I had ever done. And it was kind of weird. And I was kind of scared of going because it was just something I wasn't used to doing. And I didn't know, like, I don't know. I'm going into a situation I'm not used to, and I hate that. I get a little bit of fear when I do that. So the feeling was so strong, though, I got online to look to see if there was a Mass the next day, which would be a Monday. And yes, there was a Mass. And I think I looked it up like 5 or 6 times because I couldn't believe it. So the next day, I was kind of pondering going, but I didn't really want to go. I was streaming video games at the time, and I was on Rumble streaming every morning. 8 a.m. for me is like the best time to stream, and I don't get to do that anymore because I work. But that morning, I really wrestled with the idea, and I chose not to go to church. I threw on some capris and a t-shirt, and I had just moved a couple months before, and I had a coupon for 2 free specialty beverages at the local coffee shop, which is between here and my church. And my church is about a 15-20 minute drive. So I decided to get in the car and go to the coffee shop and get the specialty beverages. And then I started driving home, and about 2 miles out, I had this feeling that just came over me, and I recognized it because I had this feeling before, like in my 20s, so a couple decades ago. And what happened that day is I was living with my parents, and I got in the car on a Sunday to go to the store, and they live on a dirt road that comes to a T intersection with a county road, and I turned left to go to the store. And about a quarter mile down, all of a sudden I had this feeling, and it's really hard to explain, but you just feel this, I don't know, presence. It's authoritative, but not scary. And in that moment, I knew that that was God, and I knew what I had to do. And so I turned the car around and I went to church that day. And I sat next to an old man who was my person. That was the person I was celebrating Mass with, and no idea who he was. And it's funny because even in recent years, I have prayed for him. There was something about that day. He's long gone by now, definitely long gone. But yeah, it's kind of funny how things like that happen. I actually have prayed for that guy, and I really liked him, and I had no idea who he was. But when that feeling happened the day that I was driving home from the coffee shop, because I had experienced it before, I mean, I obviously knew what it was. It was the second time I had ever experienced it. And I just kind of looked up, and I was driving, and I'm like, okay, God, okay, fine. I will turn the car around. I'm going to Mass. So I went to Mass, and I came home, and I still had the empty feeling. So Tuesday, I actually made the decision to get ready for church and drive to Mass. And I went. And my pastor, who has Mondays off, was saying Mass that Tuesday. And he stopped me. He stopped me on the way out of the church. Now, I had never really spoken to him in the year and a half that I had been going there. I just kind of flew under the radar, and he stopped me as I was walking out, and I just started crying. I burst into tears, and I started telling him about the feeling I had. And at this point, it had been going on for 2 days. And he said, usually when something like this happens, it's one of two things. Either there is a wound that needs to be healed, or God is making space for you to move closer. And so he recommended a book. And the book he recommended is called Be Healed by Bob Schuchts. And I was desperate, so I went home and I ordered this book, and it came the next morning, and I started reading it. And I think I was only reading the first page of the book, and it hit me. I knew what I had to do. I knew that I had to pray out loud to Jesus, and I had to say his name. Now, as an ex-Jenner, growing up in the 80s, cradle Catholic, I wasn't used to praying to Jesus and saying his name, especially out loud. And I later learned when I was reading another book they were talking about the different generations in the Catholic Church and how they were raised. I felt like a stereotype. I was like, oh my gosh, I am not the only person like this. But I overcame my fear, I guess you could say. I felt really weird, guys. I just kind of sat there. I think if there ever, I don't know, maybe I whimpered. I put the book down and I was like, all right, I know what I have to do. So I started to pray. And I started by saying Jesus. And I started talking to him. And in that moment, 3 days into this, the empty feeling went away. I'm pretty sure Be Healed was meant to be for me. And I also bought the companion book. It's a 10-day retreat book, also called Be Healed. I recommend getting both of them. And I worked through this over the course of about, I think, a month, 20 or 30 days. And I went through it very slowly. Now, there is an exercise in here that's very difficult for me. So in each day, I think in the retreat book, he will give you the beginning of a psalm, and you continue the psalm in your own words. So whatever it prompts you to think of, say it. That's not how my brain works. So don't be afraid to alter things. I don't recommend skipping over exercises, but what I would do is, because it was just really hard for me and a roadblock and something I would typically skip, I went for a walk. I was taking hour-long walks every day. And for the first 20 minutes of the walk, I would just let my mind clear out and do what it does. And then about 20 minutes into that walk, I would start thinking about the psalm, the beginning of the psalm that Bob gives you in the exercise. And then I would just start thinking about it, pondering, letting things flow. And every single time something would come of it. I wouldn't finish the psalm like he instructed, but there was something going on, and it's called prayer. It's prayer. Not only did Be Healed teach me how to bring my problems to the Lord and how to tackle the things that do hurt. And honestly, when you do have a really good prayer life, there's painful things that come up. Not necessarily things that happened in your life, but sometimes it hurts. And Be Healed teaches you how to approach that in prayer. And because of that, whenever someone asks me, hey, I really wish I knew how to hear God, like, do you have a book recommendation? Or how do I learn to pray? Honestly, even if you think you don't, this isn't just about being healed. Bob Schuchts gives you a great framework, especially for beginners, when it comes to learning how to enter into prayer and giving God authority over your life, not in a way that he bosses you around, but like he is not going to do anything unless you give him permission. And you need to learn how to name it and give him permission and listen. And this book provides that foundation. And I really, truly believe that this was meant to be. This was where God wanted me to start. And I can't recommend it enough. Everyone should start with this if you want to learn how to pray. So don't go into it with the perspective of, oh, but I don't have any wounds. I mean, we all have wounds, but this isn't just about healing something obvious. This is about learning to hear God. And that's why you're here, right? You want to learn how to hear God. So the second book, now this one is interesting because I was listening to the Poco a Poco podcast. That's a podcast. It's the Franciscan Friars of the Renewal. So Father Mark Mary, who you're probably familiar with if you watch Ascension Presents videos, is part of the CFRs. And he is part of the Poco a Poco podcast, which they haven't done in a while. So hopefully they pick it up. They're supposed to. But they decided to do a series on this book called Fire Within by Thomas Dubay. And I kind of like half listened to that series. I wasn't too interested in it. But one day they are going over the chapter where Dubay talks about The Interior Castle by Teresa of Avila. And St. Teresa provides this framework for prayer. It's how one advances in prayer. You're moving through the mansions. There's 7 different mansions in the interior castle, and they're plural. So it's like the 4th mansions, the 5th mansions. So it's like I don't know. It's kind of weird to me how they say it. And I actually was thinking about it earlier and came up with something that made sense, and I just totally forgot it. But when they start talking about the mansions, they start giving like a brief explanation of each one. And they get to the 4th mansions. And I could have sworn there was something that I needed to hear there. And so I went back and I listened to it again, and I didn't hear anything. And I'm like, okay, maybe I'm having a hard time paying attention, which is not unusual. Sometimes I do have to listen to something 50 times before I get it. But after hearing it, I think like literally the 8th or I don't know, maybe even 10th time, I realized they said absolutely nothing about the 4th mansion. Now, I went online, I Googled it to find out about these mansions. And what I was reading, I was like, what is this stuff? I have no idea. This doesn't make sense to me. All these different people writing about these, it's providing zero clarity for me. So then I decided to get the book, and I asked for it for Christmas, and the family didn't get it for me. So then I ordered it, I think in like January or February, and started reading it. And it was incredible. It was absolutely incredible. This not only built on what I had learned by going through Be Healed, but this really started to take me into the mystical tradition of the Catholic Church. And this is when you start to hear God. Now, what was really cool about this book is I started reading about things that I had already been experiencing. And so it was confirming what was already going on for the half a year before I got the book. But then it was also teaching me how to enter more fully into that prayer. I might actually go back and reread this book again. It's been a couple of years. I do occasionally pull it off the shelf just to recap a few things, just to kind of anchor myself, because you need to do that. You need to do that in your spiritual life. You need to go back and reassess what's happening, and you lose sight of things that you once focused on because you were new. But these aren't things that you like check off and then move on. No, like everything builds upon the previous thing. This is probably, it's not the easiest read. And for me, I found the first chapter to be the hardest, but then I started really getting into it, and I couldn't put it down. I ate it up. And everyone I talk to who's read this book, and I feel like everyone has read this book who knows anything about prayer, they agree. This is excellent. So you're being steered in the right direction if you read Fire Within. One thing to know, I'm looking at the cover of this book, and it's cute because you have St. Teresa with Jesus there. And the way they're looking at each other, my impression of Teresa is she was a very bold woman with a strong personality and just loved by all. But someone I would have respected, right? It's all about growing in relationship with God. It's and I don't want to say it's not just Jesus, because Jesus is God, but it's very Trinitarian. It is incredibly Trinitarian. You are entering more fully into relationship with him. And this picture is so well done, because really what you have here are friends, and you're being called into friendship with God. It's in this friendship, as it advances, as it develops, that you're going to learn more about who you are. And I've always gone through life thinking that there was something wrong with me because I didn't fit in, and I still don't fit in. But now I realize there's nothing wrong with me. It's just God gave me this personality for a reason. He gave me the talents, the gifts that I have for a reason. And I've found that as I've advanced in the spiritual life, that the things that I didn't necessarily like about myself are things that he's actively using now. And it's exciting. When I see things unfolding, it gets to be really exciting, and it's really fun, and I love it. And that's how it should be. He is to help. God wants to bring out your identity as he created you. And when you're on that path, that's when you feel most alive and happiest. So friendship is really what it's all about. I know a lot of people, a lot of the language that you encounter in a lot of spiritual writings, and especially when the saints are speaking out of a place of great humility, it can sound kind of odd to the modern ear, especially if you're an American and you don't want to be told what to do and you don't want someone to be your boss. God's not looking to be your boss. He's looking to be your friend, but you do need to trust him and let him guide you. And prayer is all about friendship. And I want to leave you with something that I thought of in this. So this is from the Gospel of John, chapter 15. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. No longer do I call you servants, for the servant does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends. For all that I have heard from my Father I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should abide, so that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give it to you. This I command you, to love one another. When you start venturing down this path, that scripture becomes more alive and you realize that friendship. And one last thing I want to share with you. I actually had a question for my own pastor recently, and I wrote about something having to do with this, and I sent him, but there was something along this line that I'm trying to tell you so much that I can't even begin to convey in one little video. I wrote about an experience I had in prayer, and I said, it wasn't that long ago when I found myself surrendered to him, to God, in such a way that my body was so completely relaxed, but my mind was so completely focused on him with a great intensity. And in that awareness, I suddenly realized what it truly meant to abide in his love. It was incredible. And that's probably the greatest thing I've ever felt and what I always desire. And it came after tears. I tend to cry in prayer a lot. And it's amazing because once the tears come, then what comes after that is complete peace. It's like he lifts the burden, and all of a sudden I can just sit there and rest with him, and it's beautiful. And when this was happening a couple months ago, I often ask in prayer, like, what is this that I'm feeling? What is going on? I'm feeling something, and it's intense, and I don't know what to call this. And one day I realized, like, when I was crying, I was like, what am I feeling? And then I realized it was gratitude. They were tears of gratitude. In this moment that I just described, like, I was sitting there, I almost felt like I was glowing. Like, I had that look on my face. I know I could feel it. And I realized this is what it's like to abide in his love. And the experience becomes greater as you go on in life. But it's all about what's happening right now, because he's going to meet you where you are, and he's going to give you what you need right now. But the first thing he's going to do is teach you how to hear him. He's going to reveal himself to you, and these two books are the perfect foundation for helping you enter into that.